Hey there, welcome to episode 6 of the Mindful Bullhorn. I'm your host, Justin Whitowich, CMO at Borshoff, where it's our purpose to help brands make an impact. Just a quick reminder, if you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. But you can also find the Mindful Bullhorn on your favorite podcast platform like Apple and Spotify. Today, we're connecting with Allison Barber, former Chancellor of Western Governors University, Indiana, outgoing president of the WNBA's Indiana Fever, and the current chair of the Marvella Foundation, which is dedicated to providing opportunities to play and learn at Marvella, the girls' sports leadership experience. Let's go. Hey Allison, how you doing?
Welcome
doing to the show. We're
Thank
so
you.
excited to have you here and really looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to dive a little bit later on in the conversation into some of your roles and what you're doing to really lead women's sports and youth sports for girls and women as well. So the first question I wanted to lead off with for you is, what is one of your first memories of women's sports or youth sports for girls that really made an impact on you?
Probably playing is my first memory.
Okay.
And I think that's the beauty of really what we're going to talk about today is how do you get more girls playing sports at an early age?
Sure.
And so, I actually still have the video clip of my parents when they gave me my first basketball in grade school, and the enthusiasm about being able to go out and shoot hoops in my driveway is really my first memory of girls playing sports, is being able to do it.
So was that your sport growing up? Was it basketball?
It was, not just because I'm a Hoosier, but maybe because I'm a Hoosier.
Yeah.
That's what I love about this game of basketball. My parents bought a hoop in Northwest Indiana, put it in the driveway, and you get to get out and shoot hoops whenever you want to, by yourself, with friends. It's a good sport for that.
Yeah, I have similar memories. We were talking earlier, I grew up playing hockey, and there was an ice rink in the back park behind where we lived, and so we'd spend so much time out there. And I don't have a video of it, but I have a photo of me walking around in my kitchen in my diaper and skates, just putting skate marks all over the kitchen floor. So
basketball's easier around the house.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
So who have been some of the most influential athletes in your life, whether as a kid or growing up or today?
My head was always turned toward female athletes. So when I was growing up, I was a big fan of Chris Everett on the tennis court, Billie Jean King, of course. But, when you think back, there wasn't a long list. Mary Lou Retton as the gymnast. Yep. So I'm of that age that those were kind of the icons. But really to become an icon back then, you had to be really great. You had to end up on the Wheaties box because there weren't many platforms for your success to carry on, except for when you were competing. But I love sports. I love the psychology of sports, the exercise benefit of it, and watching people play was inspiring to me.
Yep, all those things. I think there's just so much leadership experience that you get in sports as well. And then teamwork, you're working with your team through the good, the bad, and the ugly, and working through problems together and really learning how to leverage each other's strengths and weaknesses.
I think that's right. And that's what the Ernst & Young research shows. 92% of women in C-suite positions played sports.
Yeah, wow.
So that's not hard to figure out because of the things you've said. It's just that teamwork. And, I have a little bit of a philosophy around the difference between leadership and tenure or experience. And sometimes people think if somebody's been in sports for 4 or 5 years, they should be the leader of the team. And that's not true in corporate America. It's not true in nonprofits. It's really not true in sports either. Just because you're the veteran doesn't mean you're the leader. These are the traits that are ingrained in somebody that they work on. It doesn't just come with experience. So, a lot of times people, I think, mischaracterize the role in sports that we would never do in business.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Yeah, that's really good insight. All right, before we jump into the Marvella project, which you're currently working on right now, I wanted to just dive into some of your previous roles and what you've done to really lead and launch new brands and new markets. So I wanted to start with WGU Indiana, Western Governors University. You were chancellor there and really instrumental in bringing that school, bringing that brand to Indiana. What drew you to that role and really helping shape its future here in Indiana?
Yeah, it's interesting. When my husband and I were in Washington, D.C. for 20 years, decided to move back home to be back in my family, then just started out on a quest to figure out where I might be able to help Hoosiers. And had the great opportunity to connect with the governor at the time, Mitch Daniels, who I knew. We were both in the Bush administration. And just said, is there something here in the state that I could do to be helpful? When I was in D.C., I had a lot of great opportunities, and I thought I could consult and hang out a shingle here. But I just really wanted to think about something to help our citizens here in the state.
I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And they talked to me, so his team talked to me about his concept of bringing WGU, Western Governors University, it was the nonprofit university, national university, online. He wanted to make that Indiana's online university.
Yeah.
Nobody had ever tried that before. So it was like white labeling the university as the state's online university. And honestly, Justin, when they told me about that, I'd never heard of the university. I thought I was going to do something more practical to help the governor and his policy and his work. And then they kept explaining this mission, helping adults typically get that bachelor's or master's degree in an affordable way online. And the more I heard about it, the more I fell in love with the mission, because I thought, if I could maybe put my hand to building out this university, then I would be helping Hoosiers, which was the goal.
Absolutely.
So that was, I'm a first grade school teacher. It was my first career. I'm in my 8th career. So teaching and education has always been the pathway to success. I proved it to myself. Every time I changed careers, I would get educated and certified in that new career. There's the value of education is, there's second to none, really, because it helps shape you, teaches you to think, develops your future. And I thought, boy, if I could help these adults, and we were fortunate, and I know it's not why I'm here, because it's not my job, but Borshoff was a huge help to us in building that brand and getting around to all 92 counties to get to adults to say, you have a new opportunity that can change your trajectory of your career and your life and also your children. And that was what drew me to the mission.
That's really nice. Yeah, that's great. So you had mentioned you have a background as an educator, certainly as a marketer as well. You have worked at agencies, you have led PR teams at an executive role. Like you'd mentioned, WGU existed in many other states, but not in Indiana. And so what was your strategy to really build awareness for WGU in Indiana when it was probably off a lot of people's radar?
Yeah, it was grassroots marketing. I love guerrilla marketing. I'm a little bit ridiculous about it because I think it works. So it was everything, Justin, from putting out I got a map every month. My goal was to have students in all 92 counties. I got a map every month to see where students had enrolled. And I met with a researcher here in Indiana, and we talked about the strategy. And she said, oh, Allison, you've got to regroup that strategy. Maybe go for 90% of counties, because there's, Switzerland County is this tiny, small county. Maybe it was Ohio County. It was the smallest county, one of the smallest counties in America.
Yeah.
She said, you're never going to get a student there. And so I understood what she was saying, and I just let it go. But then a month after month after month, and the map came through, and we got that county. We got a student in the smallest county in America. So I said to my team, okay, they said that can be done. What's left? Newton County, in northwest Indiana. We did not have a student in Newton County. So I cold called. I looked up Newton County, and I made a cold call. And I said to this woman who answered, I said, hi, I'm calling, it's ridiculous, but I said, I'm calling on behalf of the chancellor of WGU Indiana. I didn't tell her I was the chancellor because I thought that's a little embarrassing. So I said, I'm calling on behalf of the chancellor. Is there some way we could come to Newton County and tell your folks about WGU Indiana? She said, well, I write all 3 newsletters for the city, and we have a chamber meeting, and we'd be happy to have you, or happy to have the chancellor. I said, okay, when do you meet? She goes, we meet one Thursday a month. And I said, oh, when's the next meeting? She goes, it's the day after tomorrow. I said, okay, great. The team will be there. So we get in the car, we drive to Newton County, speak to the 12 people at the chamber meeting in the library. And at the end of the meeting, and I was just giving myself this big pep talk, stay focused on your goals, you're trying to help Hoosiers succeed. If I just believed that we got a student in each county, they would tell their family and friends, and that's how we would grow. So it was this organic approach. I couldn't buy ads. We're this nonprofit university. We couldn't. That was the best way to do it, I thought.
Yeah.
So get up to the Newton County Chamber, I give it my best shot, and at the end I take questions, and a woman in the back, Justin, says, "Can I enroll?" And I couldn't believe it. Like, I tried to stay professional about it, and I'm like, well, if you think this is a good fit for you, but inside I'm like doing cartwheels, like your daughter does in gymnastics, because it's like, you've got to be kidding me. We actually landed this student today.
Cool.
But then afterwards I found out she actually lived in Illinois and she worked in Newton County.
Okay.
So it didn't count. But good for us that she was a radio broadcaster in Newton County. So she lives in Illinois. She's talking about her WGU experience, and the next month somebody from Newton County enrolls. So we got all 92 counties.
Amazing.
And that's how we got this growth.
Yeah.
But but it was all those types of things, and it was also buying the car that had the most space to logo. Yeah. So I bought a SUV. I went to dealers and I looked at smaller windows meant more door, meant more space for logos. We wrapped that car with our WGU logo, right?
I remember, yeah.
And when I would go to things like the Chamber of Commerce event, I'd park it in front of the door and I'd tip the valet guy and say, what will it cost me to leave my car at this front door all night? So every executive that went in had to see my logo. It's just guerrilla marketing.
I love it.
But it's gritty and it's fun.
Well, congrats on getting all 92 counties.
Thanks. Over 17,000 graduates, and they still live in Indiana.
Yeah.
And so, that number just keeps growing. And it wasn't just me. It was a great team of people, including you and your folks, that just believed in giving people a chance.
Absolutely. And I just love what you were talking about, just looking at guerrilla efforts and just being scrappy and gritty and unexpected and unconventional, and just being so committed and driven to getting the name out there, getting the word out there. And everything that you did is just such a good example of that grit and just, pushing forward to do what you needed to do. It's great.
But don't you find that in your business, too, you have to understand who your audience is?
100%.
So a lot of people on my team were talking about what we should be doing in social media and how we could use these tools. And there's a time and a place. But if your average age student is 32 and they're working a full-time job and raising kids, 10 years ago, social media, you had to show up at their local boot scoot and barbecue in Bedford, Indiana.
Right.
I still think about it. We drove to Bedford because that's where our potential students were.
Yep. And we've probably answered some of this already, but, I worked in higher ed during that same time period, so pretty familiar. Borshoff worked in higher ed, continued to. During that time when you launched WGU, it was a highly competitive market. Of course, you're competing with the traditional four-year brick and mortar. Yeah. At the same time, there are so many for-profit online schools, the University of Phoenix, the Kaplans, and they had massive marketing budgets, right? They were everywhere, online, broadcast, TV, radio. So you mentioned a lot of sort of the grassroots and guerrilla things you were doing, but considering that tough competitive market, what did you have to say? How did you position? What was your value proposition to differentiate, to really be heard and compel people over all the competition in the market at the time?
Well, we actually had an additional layer of complexity there, is that I moved to Indianapolis. I'd never lived in Indianapolis. I had always lived in the region. So I came back with a university nobody heard about. I'm the chancellor who nobody knew.
Right.
And so even before I could get to my messaging, I had to find ambassadors to help me. And so, I learned from Governor Levitt years ago. He said, your best day is when somebody will share their Rolodex and their reputation. So their contacts and their connections, I guess, would make it more relevant to today.
Yeah.
And it just played out that way. In Indiana, that's why I love our state. The people who live here are good people that want to help other people. So in my first 365 days as chancellor, I met with 214 people. So if I met with you today and I met with you in a month, I didn't count it twice. So 214 people in Indiana took time to meet with me. Yeah. And the way that happened is I would meet with you, I would tell you about WGU, and you'd say, oh, you really ought to meet with Catherine. And you should talk to, and so I'd go meet with those two people. And so it's this force multiplier of meeting people and then following up on their leads and their opportunities. So before I could even have big messaging, I need to have individual messaging, which then helped build, they shared their reputation with me. And that's why WGU had we had more credibility than a lot of competitors.
Yeah.
Because we had people in the city and state who were well respected helping promote this, wonderful model.
Such a great strategy there, and a very sort of local strategy too. I love what you were saying about lending a reputation and leveraging reputation.
It's really humbling it's really humbling. And so it challenges me to think about that same give back to people of saying, well, this is, how do you help someone do something good for other people? And that's really the motivation.
That's great. All right.
I will get back to your point, though, about cutting through the clutter of the competition. Yeah. And I just think when your product has something that you can differentiate, which we could at our price point of our, nonprofit price point, $6,000 a year, nobody could compete with that. No. The flexibility, the quality of the education. But you have to believe, that's the thing about leadership, is you have to have optimism rooted in fact. Yeah. If it's just optimism, it comes and goes, and you're a dreamer probably more than a leader. And we love dreamers, we need them too. Sure. But that offering something that separates you from the competition. And I read this article, I got my team together, I read this article. Is this going too long?
No,
Am I too much?
Good,
okay.
We're good.
So Harvard Research did this study that compared two companies that offered the same product. And one company was outperforming the other company. So Harvard researched why. And their findings in their research was that the company that was outperforming, they outthanked their competition.
Yeah.
Outthanked. And this is before all the gratitude books were written. So I read this. I pulled my team together. I said, listen, we might not have the marketing budget, the advertising budget, and we don't even have a campus. We surely don't have a sports team. But we can have more gratitude than anyone. And we put together a gratitude campaign that every month we were getting in front of either our partners, our ambassadors, our friends, with gratitude, because we knew that they would help us move the needle. And it was really based on that Harvard research.
I love that. Similar but slightly different. I'm reading this book right now by the founder of the Savannah Bananas, and it's titled Fan First. And everything they do is just about gratitude and fan first no matter what. No expense spared for the experience of the fans. So it's really good advice.
Yeah. I was with somebody who has the opportunity to work with Taylor Swift, and I said, do you think she was born with that type of empathy and compassion? And they said, no, I think she wakes up every day saying, how can I show up as the best person for my fans every day?
Isn't that nice?
And I think that shows like the book you're reading.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, let's jump forward to the Indiana Fever, where you're outgoing president of the team. I believe you're there for 7 years, is that right?
I was there for 5 years, 6 seasons.
5 years, 6 seasons, okay. So let's talk about your very beginnings with the team. What were you doing to really build and grow that brand and get it as involved as you could within the local Indianapolis community?
Yeah. It was interesting. It was a Friday. I got a cold call from Pacer Sports and Entertainment asking me if I would consider being the president of the Fever. So it came out of the blue. But it was really rooted in the fact that the franchise was in a place. They'd won a championship. The president was stepping away to go to the Pacers. Tamika Catchings, famous, beloved player, retired. So now you find that the team's in transition. New coach, new players, and the brand could use somebody to give it a refresh. Yeah. And so I think that's why I got that phone call. My basketball career started and ended in my driveway, so I'm pretty sure I didn't get it for X's and O's. No, I didn't. So I thought, WG was really on a good path. When I got this phone call, I just considered, is there something here, kind of back to my same playbook. What could I do maybe to try and help Hoosiers through the lens of sports? Yeah. The popularity of girls' sports and women's sports was starting to gain even more momentum then. And it just dawned on me, if we have a team, one of 12 teams in the country, professional women's basketball team, how could I maybe jump in and try to elevate the brand and connect more people to this wonderful opportunity and inspire girls? And so that seemed to all come together in the right formula for me to turn my head and make me interested in giving it a shot. And so when I came in And we went through several transitions over the 5 years. And I'm from the region, and I'd never heard of the Indiana fever. So I knew immediately that there was a gap in our state once you left central Indiana. And I would wear a fever logo. So I'm a brand builder, but I'm not and this is the difference. Like, I'm not a logo builder. I'm a brand builder for brands that have impact. So it has a full story behind building the brand. Mm-hmm. But you have to start with the simple things. So I changed my wardrobe. I only wore blue and red almost every day. I just had the colors without making a big statement. Every day I was wearing colors of the fever. I would wear fever polos everywhere I went. And Justin, I would come home name the grocery store, name the store, it doesn't matter. If I had a fever logo on, oftentimes people would say to me, "Do you work for the fever?" And so I'm paying attention to this. And I said to my husband, it's so interesting. People ask me if I work for the fever when I wear a fever logo. And he said, "Well, Allison, you kind of have an executive era. You seem like you might be in a position of leadership or something." I said, "I appreciate that. However, if I wear a Notre Dame logo, a Cubs logo, a Pacer logo, or a Colts logo, nobody asked me if I worked there."
Right.
I said, "I think the storyline here is so few people were wearing fever logos that only employees would wear it." So that was okay for me. I didn't mind that challenge. It's like, okay, this just shows the work that needs to be done, especially outside of the region.
Yeah.
And so we got to work at building. My goal was to build fans throughout the state of Indiana. And the thing with sports is measured by ticket sales and, attendance and viewership on television. And somebody said to me, "Well, Allison, you'll get more fans when you start winning." And I said, "Well, philosophically, I disagree with you because I'm a Cubs fan. And Cubs don't win. And we're okay with that." So, I'm sure they're not, but I am as a Cubs fan, because what Cubs taught people is you give people something to believe in, create a culture and this community around Wrigley and the fandom and generational fans. I was a Cubs fan because my grandfather and my great uncle took me there. So there's more to fandom than just winning. You absolutely get episodic fans when you win, but your loyal fans come for other reasons. And so we just set out to build into that loyalty. How do we take the fans that have been with us for all these years? Yep. So every year I would send handwritten notes to every season ticket holder. Nice. It's 400 to 600 handwritten notes. Why? Because the Harvard research taught me out-thank people. Yeah. And I'm telling you, I would see people and they would say, "Allison, I've never gotten a handwritten note for anything I've been a sponsor of or supporter of, or, it's just," and that's not about me. It's about that moment of saying, wait, you can connect with people even when you have a losing record, which we did. But you can keep people connected because they believe what you believe and they want you to succeed. And so it was this really great study in human nature and fandom of saying, okay, we're going to have some ups and downs. During the renovation of the field house, we're going to play in 3 different locations. Our fans followed us, but the crowds were small because of that and because we were just rebuild. And so we learned a lot from the connection with people and who your true fans are.
Yeah.
So simple for me. I think people, I realize, fall into different categories. You have, this was true at WGU, it's true in Fever, it's probably true in most places, consumers, I would imagine. The people that are moved, they're all in, they're doing it, they love what you're doing. The people who are unmoved, I don't care, Justin, how fancy my speeches and your presentation, they're not doing it. They're not buying your product, they're not coming to your game, they're unmovable. And then you've got your movable middle, like they might go either way. So that's the space where I spend all my time and energy. I show gratitude to the moved, make sure they know how much I appreciate them, because we can't lose them.
Yeah.
It's, you don't want to lose a customer. It's easier to keep one than to get a new one, right? And you have that bond and you want to keep them. And then you spend your time with that movable middle saying, what would it take to excite you and energize you and connect you to what we're offering here?
So what do you say to brand leaders and marketing leaders? Overthank your customer, your audience, show their gratitude. Where do I find time to sit down and write 400, 500, 600 thank you letters? What's your advice there?
Well, you have to value it, first of all. We all have time to do whatever we value.
Yeah.
So I'd look at it this way. How much time and money and effort would it take me to go out and get 10 new customers?
Yeah.
A lot. And out of 10 pitches, I'll get one. How much time will it take me to write 10 customers I already have to make sure that I'm connecting with them? But it has to be genuine. You know, I mean, people, I always think it's interesting. People forget that they're human and we're human. Like, how would something come across to you? So I think that it's a matter of where your priorities are, because you do what you value. Yeah. And does it take time? Yes. Do I get cramps in my hand? Of course. I mean, it's it's why it's easier for people to send emails and newsletters, and it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that either. But I needed more from these relationships, and I was willing to give more.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, handwritten letters are such a nice touch, and we rarely see them anymore. And to get one from the president of the team where you're, investing in season tickets, it's a really nice touch there. I love that idea.
Thank you.
Let's talk about last season for the Fever. How fun was last season for you?
It was awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about it. It was unprecedented.
Yeah.
That is probably the word that really represents what we experienced. 2 seasons ago, we were able to draft Aaliyah Boston from South Carolina. Mm-hmm. That started putting the Fever on this really strong path to success. And then this past year, drafting Caitlin Clark was really joyful.
Yeah, I bet. So with Caitlin Clark obviously getting a lot of attention, rising through NCAA, and then Fever draft her first overall. What challenges did that pose for you and the team, and leading the team with this new level of increased attention that the team has never seen before, really being in the spotlight, media talking about them locally, nationally, ESPN talking about them, Pat McAfee. I mean, everyone's talking about the Fever now. Was that, obviously there was a lot you could leverage there, but what challenges did that cause for you?
It's funny when you said that, it makes me think about my polo shirt story I told you.
Yeah.
The day we drafted Caitlin, I was walking, we all had these T-shirts on, first pick T-shirt or something. And I was walking through a store. So it's my first, we drafted her. She came for the signing, so that was the press conference day. I went right from that. I had to run into a store. I run into a store. So I'm wearing my Fever gear. And somebody looks at me and they're like, cool shirt. So just like that.
Just like that.
And I've not one time has somebody asked me if I work for the Fever.
Amazing.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, it's anecdotal, not solid research.
It just happened like that. Yeah.
I have not been asked one time if I work for the Fever.
Wow.
So as a matter of fact, I was in, and I'll unpack whatever you want to unpack around it, but I was in Northwest Indiana coming home from Chicago, our Fever game in Chicago. Mm-hmm. I stopped by a little restaurant. They make the best lemon rice soup. Uh-huh. So I go in to get some to bring home. And I walk in and I'm wearing a Fever polo with just the F, not the word Fever, just the F. I go in, the owner's there. I'm like, oh, I love this soup. I get a lot of it to bring home. And he looks at my shirt and he said to me, have you ever been to a Fever game? Honestly, Justin, I almost couldn't answer because I was so flabbergasted that he knew what that logo was in Northwest Indiana, because that's a Chicago media market. So they don't typically see Fever games. And I said, well, actually, I have been to a Fever game. So we carry on this conversation. I tell him I'm the president. We chat a little bit more. I go to my car, and this gentleman comes out, and he said, would you be willing to say hi to my father? He's a big Caitlin Clark fan. Oh. I said, sure. He turns his phone around, and now I'm on FaceTime with his father. And his father said, I love Caitlin Clark. I watch all her games. I have to stay up till 5 a.m. to see her. And I said, why? I said, well, 5 a.m. I said, well, where do you live? He said, oh, I live in Greece. Oh. So we went from this small, trying to build the brand in the state of Indiana to Indiana, America, global. I mean, it has really been, it's just transformed the game.
So cool.
But for us, the challenges were being ready. And so I would say that to leaders. When you think about what could happen, did we know we were going to get Aaliyah Boston? No, because it's that lottery of you're going to get the first pick. Did you know you'd get Caitlin Clark? No. When we got the first pick, we didn't know if she would leave college to go into the draft. But as a leader, you don't control the outcomes. As a leader, you control the pieces to be ready for that outcome. And it's a famous quote, success is where preparation meets opportunity. And so we were preparing really for the last 5 years. The company, our owners are so committed to the Fever, the Simon family's the best of the best. the transformation of the field house and under the, Mel Rains's work there to redo the field house, the Fever locker room, the practice court, all of those things were preparation, waiting for opportunity. And so that's, I think, the role of the leader is to start building the team, building the pieces. And then the hardest part is changing the mindset. And this is where it's really challenging. And unfortunately, not everybody scales. So to go from that, the gritty guerrilla marketing mindset of like, how do we build more brand? I wore I took the Fever mascot all around the state of Indiana. Like, this is gritty. That's a scarcity mentality in the best of ways. Like, we're so hungry for the customer. We're so hungry for the business. We're so hungry to keep our fans. We'll write 600 thank you notes. Like, that's gritty. When something like Caitlin comes to your team and the trajectory changes, your mindset has to change from being scarcity to abundance. And not everybody can make that adjustment. And so instead of like, how do we get more fans, which is what we were talking about, how do we get celebrities to come to a game? Now it's how are we have this abundance mentality that we can scale to having Simone Biles and Gabby Thomas show up to a Fever game. Like, that's an overnight change that takes a lot of mental exercise and, discipline.
It does, and I think it takes a lot of bravery and strength because there's risk in investing and planning for the future that may or may not come. Of course, we're all confident that the Fever would, find that, and it did, but it takes a lot of bravery to invest in something that you don't know how long it's going to take to pay off for you.
That's right. And it was bumpy in the beginning. There was a lot of sport fans have a lot of opinions.
Sure, yeah.
And so, when you start off and you're playing the toughest teams in the league and you've got this young brand new team. It took some time, but that's the other, not that we're trying to unpack all the elements of leadership, but that's the other piece is you have to take some patience and you have to be willing to take the criticism because you believe in the future.
Well, now with the spotlight on the Fever, on the WNBA, on Caitlin Clark, how did that change your marketing playbook? What were you able to do to really leverage the spotlight, and the brand just now has international awareness and everyone knows Caitlin Clark?
There are a couple times in my career where we've had inflection points. And that's, and so I worked at the American Red Cross. We were always out raising money for disasters, trying to make sure the mission of the Red Cross is to help alleviate human suffering. Like, I love the Red Cross on every level. And then a tornado would happen, or then a crisis would happen. And boy, the support of the American people would show up in meaningful ways. And it still does, thank heavens. Those are inflection points where something happens and it changes behavior. I worked at the Pentagon on 9/11. I was on 9/11, I was meeting with an ad agency in Atlanta to help create an ad campaign to encourage more people to enlist in the military on 9/11. Our country comes under attack, and what happens the next day? We have lines forming outside of recruiting. So we didn't have to, we never used that ad campaign. There was an inflection point that changed human behavior. And those are pretty dramatic experiences and examples, but it's the same human behavior of inflection points that change behavior. You can't script them, you can't plan for them, you have to be ready for them, and then when it happens, you have to have a team that's willing and ready to maximize them. And so the inflection points are oftentimes patriotic or loving or emotional, but the important thing is to take that inflection point and make it long-lasting. And that's what we worked on with the Fever. It's how do you take this moment of this notoriety and visibility, and Caitlin Clark's a wonderful person, and we're grateful. She fits our culture, she fits our state beautifully. And then our job is how do we come around from a PR, branding, marketing, leadership standpoint, not the X's and O's, but just that's a different story altogether. One I don't even know how to explain. But how do you come around and say, this is this moment, this inflection point, now how do we build on it and start raising the bar so that the conversation continues and it's bigger than the game? And that's really part of Caitlin's goal, is to inspire girls around the world and kids to play basketball. And so, sometimes you find yourself, you're leading, sometimes you're next to, and sometimes you're following. And so there's this dance that you do with somebody as popular and rightfully so, is a Caitlin Clark. That sometimes she's the lead of the story, sometimes she's in the story, supporting the story. And the Fever and the team, we did the same thing.
Yeah, that's really good insight there as well. And I want to just ask one more Caitlin Fever question before we move on to Marvella Project. And so what do you think it is that was so special about Caitlin Clark that she could really build up and increase awareness and popularity for women's basketball at the NCAA level? Now with the WNBA, women's basketball is on the map in a bigger way than it ever has been before. And so why do you think it took Caitlin to make this happen?
I don't know if it took Caitlin to make it happen or if it was all of the pieces were in place so that when Caitlin appeared on the scene, the community, the environment was ready for Caitlin. And so I think back to 2020 when there was COVID and the WNBA season hadn't started yet. And a lot of voices were saying to the commissioner, just take the season off. You haven't started. Unlike the NBA, they were still in season. They had to finish in the bubble. Just take the season off. Yeah. And she refused to do it. And she created the bubble for the W, and they had the season. Well, honestly, Justin, I look back at that one decision of the commissioner. Had she taken that season off, there's no guarantee the WNBA would have come back or how many years it would have been to try and rebuild. So had her decision been different, there wouldn't have been a WNBA for a Caitlin Clark to perform in. So there are a lot of little decisions along the way that made this moment, first of all, the opportunity available for somebody like Caitlin. Yeah. And then she's just a spectacular player. A lot of people try to get me to compare Caitlin to this or to that, and it's like she's one of one. And that's awesome. So she's an amazing athlete that has this amazing, I think she's got talent beyond talent, and she's also has a giftedness about her. And it's the personality, it's the humility, it's the connectivity that she has. And you've probably seen it. You go to the symphony, Indianapolis Symphony, and you can tell an artist or a musician, or you see a movie or a play, you can see people who are really well trained, and they're excellent. And then sometimes, if you're lucky, you see somebody who has the gift. Yeah. And it's magical, and she's got both.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. Well, let's move on to Marvella. Your current role, your current project. What is Marvella, the girls' sports leadership experience?
Yeah, we're excited about this. It's the first one in the country. So Marvella is the opportunity for girls. It's to play sports, to learn about leadership and mental health and physical health and well-being. So imagine this, that we have 120 acres up in the region where I'm from, so by Fair Oaks Farms, adjacent to the farms. And we're going to build the country's first complex that really focuses on how do you develop girls through the game of sports, but the 360, the full life experience. We named it the Marvella Project after Birch By's late wife. So Marvella By couldn't go to college because there was no Title IX, so she couldn't get financial aid. And therefore she became one of the inspirations for Senator Birch By when he penned and sponsored Title IX. So Indiana is the birthplace of Title IX. We're super proud of that. Mm-hmm. And we thought, we'll call this the Marvella Project, and we will create for girls 12th grade and under this wonderful experience where they can come on weekends and in the summer for weeks of camp. And we're going to do the difficult. We're going to do all these sports: basketball, volleyball, field hockey, lacrosse, rugby, track and field, tennis, because Billie Jean King's into it and would not include tennis. Right. And flag football. So all of the sports for girls where they can come and really develop their skills. And then when their game is done and they're waiting for their next tournament game, they'll go through our training facility and get modules on mental health awareness and grittiness and virtual reality around how do you see yourself in the future. Cool. So imagine your daughter coming, and we're building all of these confidence building blocks that will she ever, go on to be the greatest softball player? Maybe. But what if she goes on to be the greatest version of herself? Right. Isn't that really the goal?
It is. I love that.
And that's what we're going to do. We're going to build the first one here in Indiana, and we'll build 4 more around the country. Cool. Phase 3, we'll build a museum, the first ever women in sports museum. So it'll be this amazing complex. We'll hire 1,000 people. It'll be a great economic development engine for Newton County. But more importantly, will help girls.
I love it. So that kind of transitions perfectly into my next question. you obviously are very committed and dedicated to purpose, right? Leading an organization with purpose. Same thing with me and Borshoff. I think having that North Star of a purpose does a lot to help build a culture and also build a brand as well. So what is Marvella's purpose, if you could define it in a short statement? And to you, why is purpose so important for brands and for cultures?
So in reverse order, I think, you get one chance at this life. Yeah. So I heard somebody years ago say it's not a dress rehearsal. This is what you get.
Yeah.
And so pick your purpose. And I think that drives all of your decisions. When I was in my late 20s, I read the book Tuesdays with Morrie, and the guidance there was write your eulogy. Because if you write what you want somebody to say about you when you die, it will teach you how to live. So it's reverse psychology, but I felt the exercise to be very important and helpful and instructive. And then I landed on a word through that process of just contribution. And so that's always been my drive, that whatever I do, it's got to have some level of contribution. And sometimes it's big, hopefully, and sometimes it's small, but it's got to have that. And so that's what drives my decisions. And it's, so I do go from career to career and job to job because I'm curious and I like trying new things, but it always has to have that purpose as a part of that. Yeah. And so when I took this meeting, Tamika Catchings asked me to take a meeting to learn more about Marvella, and it turned my head around all these things we've talked about today. Good for Indiana. It's good for girls. It has purpose. Long-term. When I taught first grade, I thought, this is so interesting. I'm teaching this child something that they won't remember me for the rest of their life, but they will remember this for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Learning how to read, tying your shoe. As a parent, you're doing this every day with your kids. But they'll remember you all your life. But my students won't.
Hopefully.
Of course they will. But that's the point of so I was learning about Marvella, and I said, well, this is the idea is how do we ignite passion in girls around the game of sports and educate. So we're igniting their passion and their curiosity, and we're educating them with life skills. And so those two things combined, my sense of things is, that will be a formula for success. There's a lot, 5 million kids are dealing with depression in America right now. The CDC says one thing you could do to mitigate depression is keep kids active.
Yeah.
So that to me we're going to do our part.
Yeah, it's a great purpose. And I was on your website and I saw your brand purpose videos. Very beautiful.
Thank you.
Very well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a really good summary of why purpose is so important. Not only as a North Star and a guiding light, again, for the culture, why we're here, why we show up, but I think it gives people real motivation and inspiration that we are doing something impactful and something good for the world and the community. And I think it just can help be a really good driver of success. Yes. So I'm a big fan of purpose.
Yes. Yeah. And it comes in little pieces.
It does, yeah.
And I think that's what's hard. In Atomic Habits, it talks about the reward of good habits are delayed. The reward of bad habits are immediate. If I eat those fries on the way home, that feels great. If I work out on the way home, I don't really feel the benefit of that till weeks to come, or maybe years to come.
Right.
But I think that is this whole idea around, we want big solutions. We're impatient as a society.
Yep.
We talk about mental health and we want one thing to cure it and to fix it, and it just doesn't work that way. It's these little pieces around what's your purpose, and then what are the little steps you make every day to live into that purpose, whether it's for your clients or yourself.
Exactly. Well, we'll wrap up here, but what impact do you hope that Marvella will have on the world?
Yeah, I think Marvella, if we do this right, and we plan to, it will have several things that will be successful. First and foremost, girls will be confident in the path that they choose for themselves, whether or not it's on a sports team or not. So building confidence in girls will impact the world in great ways. And the second thing, it will be bringing visibility to differences. And so that is done through sports, in team building and bringing people together. Marvella done right, and it will be, can silence some of the negative rhetoric that happens in society today, because sports brings people together.
It does. Yeah.
And we're going to build that into this curriculum and platform in a way that it will shape future leaders.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such an important impact. And you're right, when I talk to leaders in sports, a lot of them talk about the impact of bringing people together and celebrate something and work towards something together as being really impactful.
Sure. So. You never ask somebody before you high-five them after a great three-point shot that wins the game at the buzzer. You don't ask them who they voted for before you high-five them.
Well said. Yeah, completely agree. Well, Allison, thank you so much for today's conversation.
Thank you.
I had a really good time learning more about what you've been doing in the past, what you're up to now, and I think you just provided a lot of really good insights into being gritty when it comes to building a brand, smart marketing strategies, and just leadership overall. So our audience will appreciate all of that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right. And so to our audience listening or watching today, please remember you can see this episode and previous episodes on Borshoff's YouTube channel, or the audio version and podcast on all your favorite podcast channels like Spotify and Apple. So Allison, last question. If people want to learn more about Marvella, where should they go?
Oh, thanks. MarvellaSports.com.
MarvellaSports.com. All right, great. Thanks again. Thanks, everyone. See you on the next one.